Hello everyone and welcome back to Everything Tech, and in the last episode I taught you how to install Windows 7 and today we're installing Windows 8.1. So if you saw my previous video, you should be familiar with the screen here. If you haven't, I'll link down that video in the description on how to install Windows 7 in Parallels. Today we're doing Windows 8.1, so the installation should be similar. And here's the option we're going to be choosing today. And for this installation, you are going to need either the ISO file, a DVD, let it be a homemade DVD or a store-bought one. I have a homemade because I downloaded the ISO from Microsoft's website when I got this over the summer, and I decided to make a bootable DVD. That way I don't have to always keep making a bootable USB drive. But if you have a bootable USB drive, you can also use that too. And we click on that, and this is the find manually pane. But you should be able to start. It should take you into finding automatically, and it should locate all your operating systems that you have on this computer. And that is if it finds either a DVD, an image file, or a bootable drive. If nothing shows up here, you can locate manually, and if you know where it is, you can either, well, of course, the DVD, it's pretty straightforward since it's already plugged in here, but the image file, if you know where you have it, if you have it on a separate USB drive, all you do is click and drag, and it loads up. Or a USB drive, you plug in your bootable USB drive. If it doesn't show up here, it probably doesn't work. So I would recommend either an image file or a DVD drive. Although a DVD drive is going to be slightly slower than an image file. So we're using a DVD this time. And you can see here Windows 8.1. And we can click continue. Now in this next window, you can punch in your product key. I don't really recommend doing that on my behalf because I don't want you guys taking my product key, and I don't know if this is stored in the Parallels or if it's pushed online anywhere, so I'm not going to really bother with this. So you don't really have to punch in your product key now. And Express installation, I like to uncheck this because Express installation, Parallels automatically selects the settings for the Windows machine. It even names it. It gives it some funky name like Parallels virtual machine, something. I just don't like it because I like to name my computer. I like to select how I want my updates to be installed. And if you click on Express, uncheck it, you can actually punch in your product key during the installation. If you don't, you're gonna have to wait till you're done creating a virtual machine or until you're done creating or installing it. So I like to uncheck it because I like to name my computer, give it a password. Although I don't never give a computer a password because I usually forget. Okay, in this next window we have several options. We have software development in case you are developing any software using Visual Studio. Software testing in case you are testing any software for Windows. If you're using computer aided design, this is the option for you. Productivity if you are using any spreadsheets, let's say QuickBooks and all that stuff. If you're going to be using it for games, this is the option you click. Although you can always go back and select another option. So if I click software development, but I actually want to use games, and I forgot to uncheck this one, I'll show you how to go back. So I'm going to click games and click continue. Here we can name the computer. We can name it Windows 8.1, or we can just name it Windows if it's the only version of Windows we have on our computer. Keep in mind that if you're going to have multiple versions of Windows 8, the next version is going to have Windows 8.1, and then the following numbers, Windows 8.2, depending on how many you have. So if you want to give it a unique name like Windows/Gaming or Windows Gaming, and then the other one Windows Software Development, you can name it just like that. But I'm going to keep it at Windows 8.1 because it's the only Windows 8.1 I'm going to have on the computer. And this next option, share with other users on this Mac. If you have other users on your computer and you want to share this Windows 8.1 with those users, you can click here and it automatically shares it with all the users on this computer. But because this is my sister's computer and she is the only user of this computer, we're not going to check that. And we have 824.9 gigabytes of free space, and the virtual machine will take up 20 gigs. And this is how much gigs the actual image file that you're creating is going to take up. After that, whatever you add on it, that 20 gigs goes up higher. So if I give this computer 500 gigs of storage, it's virtual 500 gigs, and those 20 gigs are always going to be there. Create aliases on Mac desktop. Again, I'm not familiar with what this feature does, so I'm not really going to get into that. If you know what it does and you used it in the past and you like it, you can go ahead and use it. But because I've never used it in the past, I'm not really going to get into that. Next feature is customize settings before installation. I really like this feature because it lets you double check all your features to make sure whatever you pick is whatever you want. Or if you forgot to select an option that you wanted, you can always go back there. So we're going to click here and I'll just show you what everything does. So there we go. I'm going to move this out of the way and show you some features. Windows 8.1, 2 CPU cores, 4 gigs of RAM, and 128 gigs of storage. In previous versions of Parallels, it used to just give you 64 gigs, which is why I'm used to using this feature of customized settings before installation, because I thought 64 gigs wasn't enough for what I was going to do. So here you get another chance at renaming the virtual machine. You can add a description here, like this version will be used for gaming, just like that. And or you can name it software development. And let's say you pick games, you can always change it here to any of the options prior, but I'm gonna keep it at games only, and I'm not really gonna give it a description because I know what these are, but you can give it a description if you like. So we go to options. Most of this stuff is really personal preference, but I'll show you some of the things that I do. For example, here I do not share cloud folders with Windows. I keep map volumes to Windows. Try to say that more than 3 times, because there's this Parallels desktop feature, or shared folder that you can access all your files here on Mac through Windows. Applications, I don't share Windows applications with Mac because it gets annoying, and I don't show Windows notification area in the menu bar because every time I open, let's say, Internet Explorer, you see it down at your taskbar or down on your dock, and it's annoying. For full screen, I use OS X full screen, and I activate screen corners, scale to fit screen. I'll put it automatic. It's pretty smart, it should know. And use all displays in full screen. If you don't check this one's crucial. If you don't check this, the virtual machine will full screen in your current window instead of creating a new window. That way you can always swipe back and forth between Mac OS and Windows. Modality, I don't mess with that. Web and email, not really. And you can more options. You can sync time from OS X from either OS or don't sync. I don't choose this one because if the time is wrong in Windows, it might change it here in my main computer, so I sync from OS X because usually the time is correct here. Share Mac clipboard and preserve text formatting. I usually leave those because it says that if you don't, it's not going to work. All your mounted drives and all that stuff. And swipe from edges, you can move from side to side. My computer no longer supports Apple Remote, so I'm not going to check that because it won't work. But if your computer is one of those that support the Apple Remote, you can check that if you're going to be using it. And allow Windows to access your Mac's current location. I know there's people out there that might say security wise they don't like to click it. I'm one of them. I like to uncheck it because I don't want Windows to know my current location. Now we move on to hardware. Here's where you can choose your CPU and memory depending on your computer. If you're using a laptop, you may want to keep it at 2, but because my iMac has a quad-core processor, I'll give it a quad-core processor. For some reason, it gives me that the recommended RAM is around between 512 megs to 4 gigs. Any higher is going to say it's dangerous. So I usually keep it at 4 gigs, and that's enough for most of the games I play. You're not going to probably be able to run Grand Theft Auto full screen max settings with 4 gigs of RAM. So if your computer supports more than 4 gigs of RAM, if you're like mine has actually 8, so I like to give half of those to the computer. That way Mac OS can run smoothly in the background. But if your computer has 16, you can give it 8. If it has 32, you can give it 16. And if you're lucky enough, your Mac has 64 gigs, you can give it 32 gigs of RAM, and it should be smooth. But I wouldn't recommend it. I like to stay in the recommended area. It's there for a reason. Boot order, not really gonna mess with that. Graphics, I'm gonna give it 1 gig of graphics. So 1 gig is usually 1024, even though 1000 is technically a gig. 1024 for some reason has been the standard. Mouse and keyboard, because I did select gaming, it optimizes all my settings for gaming. Shared printers, I'm not going to be printing. If you're going to be printing with your Windows 8, keep this checked, but because I'm going to be using this for gaming, I'm going to uncheck this. I'm not going to really be printing anything if I have to. If I absolutely have to print, it'll be through Mac OS. Network, it gets the internet connection directly from the Mac. You can actually have it get Wi-Fi, so it connects on its own. It gets its own IP address, but it should get the internet from your computer, and it should be just fine, especially if you're on a wired. Sound, not really going to get into that. Here, USB and Bluetooth. Share Mac camera with Windows. I don't want to share my Mac camera with Windows because I'm not going to be using Skype. But if you're going to be using this, for example, to use Skype, because the Skype version for Windows is better or something, or you're going to be using something else for the camera, you can check that. But I'm going to check it because I'm not really going to use anything. Hard disks. Here's a feature where you can select how much storage space you want to give your computer. So you just click on edit, and it loads the drive, the virtual drive, and here you can give it a terabyte, a gigabyte, 2 terabytes. It's a new feature here in Parallels 11 where you can select 2 terabytes. It used to go up to just 1, but I'm gonna give it 512 because that's enough for what I'm gonna be doing. It's more than enough. And then we click apply, and it says that it's highly recommended to make a backup of the virtual machine before this operation, and there's really nothing to back up because we haven't really installed anything. So we can click continue and disregard that message. You might get an error message saying that it couldn't format the drive. Just click OK and then click close, and if it says 512 gigabytes here, you should be fine. Floppy disk, nobody uses that anymore. And CD drive, we're going to keep this connected because of course our installation DVD is on there. That's it for hardware. Security, you can require, if you're using this on a business level, you can require a password to exit full screen, change virtual machine stats, and manage snapshots. You can also isolate Windows from Mac. This is only if you're going to be doing dangerous stuff like browsing the web. You might want to isolate Windows from Mac because the virus might leak through onto your operating system, your main operating system. But because I'm using for this game, for games only, I'm not really going to be browsing the web. But if you're afraid of that, click here, and it says, do you want to isolate the virtual machine from your Mac? If you isolate the virtual machine, the shared settings, shared application, disks, and folders will be disabled. Because I like to share my disks with Windows, I'm not going to check that. So what shared disks are, for those of you who don't know, basically when you install Parallels tools, it creates a network drive that lets you connect to your Mac. You can access your downloads, you can actually documents, all that stuff on your computer, and you can drag and drop between each other. And that's one of the main reasons why I don't check this, because of that feature. Backup, you can also time machine backup the virtual machine, Smart Guard, and you will need at least 50 gigabytes of free space in order to enable this feature. 50 gigabytes is a lot, that's why it's not enabled. And for business, you can restrict editing and put on a password to restrict editing of the virtual machine, and change guest OS password, all this stuff for a business. I'm not really gonna use this because it's for personal. Once we're done here, we can unclick that and check our settings here. 4 cores of computing power, 4 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. Let's say, for example, I forgot to change the storage. You can always click configure and go back and do your editing, whatever you forgot. If everything checks out, everything's the way you want it, we can click continue, and we should see the Windows is loading files screen. Not really loading files, it's not like that anymore. And from here on, the installation will be the same if you're installing Windows 8.1 on a separate PC. Like if you built your first PC, or you're clean installing the operating system on your first PC, or on any PC for that matter, from here on, it's the same, which is why I like unchecking Express installation. This might take a while. Alright, so after you're finished loading the DVD, of course if you're using a DVD it's going to take longer. If you're using an image file, it should be quick. But you see this screen, Windows Setup, and it does look familiar. It looks familiar because we saw this in Windows 7. And here you can select your language, English United States, and you can also click on English Zimbabwe and all these other time and currency formats. And keyboard input mode, you can also check here depending on which keyboard you're using. Because I'm in the United States, I use US English, and time and currency format for English US. Of course, language to install, it's only English United States because it's an English or United States ISO file that I'm using. Not an ISO file, but a DVD. If you got this in the UK, of course it can say English UK or English wherever you might have got this. So we click next, and like I said, from here on it's the same process when you're clean installing or you are installing Windows 8 on a computer. So I will be referencing that if you're watching this for separate computers. Repair your computer, I'm not going to get into that. Install now, and setup is starting. It does seem rather familiar to Windows 7, and it stays this way for Windows 10 as well, which I will be making a video on. Alright, so the first window we get for Windows setup is to enter our product key. I'm not going to enter my product key because of course there's people out there who want to take it, so no. Alright, so the next step after punching in your product key, you get to choose whether you want to upgrade or install Windows. If you're going to be upgrading your computer, for example, if you're doing this on a separate computer, if you're going to be upgrading from, let's say, Vista or Windows 7, and you want to keep all your files, this is a feature you're going to use. But if you want to start fresh, or for, in our case, our clean installation of Windows in Parallels, you're going to use custom. And we're going to be using custom, and here's our 512 gigabyte file or hard drive that we made, and we're just going to click new. Maximum partition is 524 gigs, and no, it's not going to pull out the remaining 12 gigs from thin air. It uses maximum partition, that way when formatted we get 511 gigabytes. And you click OK. And drive partition 2 is our main partition, 511.7, and our drive partition 1 is system reserve, 350 megs. It's actually more than Windows 7. Windows 7 was 100 megs, but given that this version of Windows has a lot of really new features. Alright, so now we click on drive partition 2 because that's where we want to install Windows. If we click here, it's going to say that we cannot be installed because there's not enough storage. We click this one, it starts installing Windows, so we'll be back. Alright, so after several reboots, the installation of Windows is complete. Now all that's left to do is to personalize your computer, and of course Windows 8 is a lot more about personal choice and personal preferences. Here you can select the color you want, whether you want it yellow, which is a little too much, or black. I may choose black, and I'm going to name it iMac. Of course, because I am running this on an iMac. And you can choose any of the colors you see here that you want, and you can always go back and change them. I'll show you how to change them once we're in here. Settings, express settings. I usually use express settings. It's smart enough to know what settings to choose. Next, you're going to have to set up your Microsoft account, but I don't want to, and I'll show you how you can skip this. If you don't want to use your Microsoft account because maybe you have more than one, or you just really don't want to connect your Microsoft account to your Windows 8.1, you can create a new account, and it's going to create you a new Microsoft account, and then down here you see sign in without a Microsoft account. Now you can pick a username for the computer. I'm going to name it Alex. No password hint, nothing, because I'm bad with passwords. I'm usually going to forget a password. And now it checks for updates. It's going to basically what this does is check for several updates or several drivers that you might need in order to run Windows 8. So I'm not going to be filming this because it's all self-automated. It starts installing your apps, like all the apps that you have on in your main home screen, your start screen. So I'll cut to when we get to our start screen because that's the next step. Nothing really happens from here on except color changes, and if you want to sit here and watch color changes, I don't really want to, so I'll see you in the start screen. Alright, so here we are in our start screen. I actually went ahead and activated my copy of Windows because in order to change the color, you need to activate your copy of Windows. So in order to change the color, for example, I don't like this black, or whatever color you pick, you don't like it, you just go over to your top right hand corner and bring it down to show your charms. Then you go to settings, then you go to personalize. Here you can select different backgrounds, and I'll show you the different backgrounds once I install Parallels tools, because of course this 4:3 aspect ratio won't really let us see all the available different backgrounds there are, including allowing you to see your background. Alright, so in order to install Parallels tools, what you need to do is key in Control and Option, and that releases your Mac OS cursor. Then you go up to the top here, go to Actions, and install Parallels tools. Another way of doing it, and I clicked on it, another way of doing it is to go down here to your dock, locate Windows 8.1, right click it, then you go to Actions, and install from there. Those are the two options to do it. And once in here, you saw the little ribbon up here, and you could have clicked that and it would have accessed your DVD drive or Parallels tools, but because I was explaining stuff to you guys, I missed it. So we just go into our computer, again, my computer, or go to this, just click here and it takes you to your my computer now. It used to take you to your files. And then you click on DVD drive, click yes, and it starts installing Parallels tools. Just give it a while and it will require a restart. There we go, it changed, but it kind of looks kind of funky. So 2560 by 1440, you can go 2560 by 1600 if your computer supports it, and Parallels tools is done. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this, and you have 2 minutes, or it has a 2-minute timer to restart on its own, but if you don't want to wait for those 2 minutes, you can force it to restart. And when we get back, I'll show you how to change the color scheme. Alright, so now that we're back in our start menu, for some reason it went back to blue. I don't know why it went back to blue, but we're gonna go ahead and change this. Personalize, and click this one, and I think we had it in black and gray, something like that, something like this. It looked like this, but these are the different kinds of backgrounds you can choose from. Robots, whatever that is. I think it's apartment complexes. Very modern and minimalist type art pieces. So whichever one you find. If you don't like any of them, you can always click on the last option, which basically shows your wallpaper in the background. Alright, so before I leave, I'm going to show you how to update your computer, because of course updating your computer is really crucial to the security of your computer. To update your computer, if you don't have PC settings already here in your start screen, you can either go up here to the top right hand corner and search, or you can just go down here to the little arrow and look for it on your apps. PC settings, it's the little wrench, and you should see the screen here, and you go down here to update and recovery. Windows update, check for updates, and if it finds updates, you can always view details, and you're going to see that's all these definition updates. Like let's say this one here, important Windows Defender. And this is a patch or an update to Windows Defender, which is a built-in security feature in Windows 10 or Windows 8. It's sort of like a free antivirus, and in order to, or if it's updating it, because there's a virus out there that can potentially harm your computer, and it's updating it so it can fight it off. And you see all these security updates for Windows Internet Explorer 11, security updates. This is why it's important to keep your computer up to date. Even though there are a whole bunch of updates, and I've seen more, I've seen a lot of updates, it's good to always update your computer. Alright, so now we click install and we download and install our updates. That's how you install updates in Windows 8.1. Thank you all for watching. See you all in the next tutorial in which we install Windows 10. Thank you all for watching again. See you in the next one.